In the final year of the SEC East, I want to talk about Missouri's chance to win the thing for a third time coming up right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And Missouri, its final season in the SEC East. Of course, in 2023, the final season of the SEC East, period. Ironically enough, the conference that actually pioneered the division model all the way back in 1992, now with the first edition of the SEC championship football game in the Georgia Dome. Well, they're going away from it now with the additions of Oklahoma and Texas. And, well, if you look at one guy's projections, Austin Mock over at The Athletic, heck, he gives Missouri a chance to not only win the East, but a chance to win the league at 1.3%. Hey, not too shabby. I'll take it. Well, quite honestly, if Missouri is simply good enough to win the East, well, they got a chance to win the whole thing. No doubt about that. And for those of you who are coming here to laugh at me and be dismissive of this notion, don't get me wrong. I'm not picking anybody but Georgia to win the East this year. And I think Tennessee at this point is obviously in a tier below Georgia, but indeed in a tier all by itself right now. I think then you've got Missouri, South Carolina, Kentucky, Florida, all four of those teams in a tier together. You know, shake them all up into a hat at this point. I'm not really sure there's a gigantic difference. Maybe I'll have a different opinion. We'll all have a different opinion probably coming in November. But if you're going to make a case for Missouri to win this division again, and for you who are a little bit younger, well, let me remind you of something. Since Missouri joined the Southeastern Conference in 2012, guess who's won the East? Well, Georgia, Florida, and yes, your Missouri Tigers a couple times. But it's now been, 9 years since the last one? So, yeah, fair to say, if you don't exactly have a clear memory of that, if you're a current Missouri student, well, I don't blame you. Time moves on pretty quickly. Certainly Carson Beck, the presumptive Georgia starting quarterback, well, he had not yet gone through puberty at that point. That's how quickly life moves at you. And speaking of Carson Beck, I understand that, listen, he's the much higher rated recruit coming out of high school than Stetson Bennett. Obviously, Bennett was a walk at the University of Georgia. And yet, the two-time national champions, I just see too many people assuming that all the quarterback position will be fine for the Dawgs. And listen, I get it. Georgia obviously has been incredibly dominant the last couple seasons, despite barely squeaking out a victory against Missouri last season. But why do we just assume that Carson Beck is going to be better than Stetson Bennett? I'm not assuming that at all. And by the way, we can't even assume that he's the starter. Brock Vandegrift could take the job, perhaps some other guys in that competition as well. And by the way, if Missouri matched up pretty well with Georgia last season, we got to ask yourself what's really changed versus last year. Well, I would say the number one thing that's changed is pretty direct. Dominic Lovett transferred from Missouri to Georgia, and yes, that's going to help their wide receivers. Also, I think Georgia fans would probably generally tell you that, hey, we didn't have our top group of wide receivers, not even including Lovett, obviously, for last year's game. Hey, fair enough. I just want to see that Georgia passing game really click. All I'm saying is there's at least a possibility that it doesn't go perfectly for the Dawgs in year 3 here. By the way, there has not been a 3-time national champion in college football, a 3-peat winner in guess what? I'll give you a minute to think about this one. Pause your podcast machine, your YouTube, your computer real quick. Think about this. Who was the last team in college football that won 3 national championships in a row? Would you believe it was Minnesota all the way back in the teeth of the Depression in the 1930s? Yes, the Minnesota Golden Gophers. So the point here is that it's really hard to win 3 in a row. Even Nebraska, during their incredible run in the 90s, they won 3 out of 4. They stumbled a year. Miami never did it. The Big Red Machine down in Oklahoma never did it. So my point is, there are things that can go wrong. It's really easy to see a scenario where Georgia could stumble, lose a couple games, maybe even to Missouri. That's the thing. If it's going to happen, almost certainly Missouri is going to need a tiebreaker over the Georgia Bulldogs. And listen, while again, Georgia, one of the all-time great couple of seasons in 21 and 22. Nobody's dismissing that whatsoever. But we did see Georgia struggle somewhat at the position as recently as the 2020 campaign season, before they finally figured out, hey, JT Daniels right now is actually the best guy. Well, Stetson Bennett struggled early in that season. The other guys that Georgia tried at the position, it just never really worked out. By the way, a new offensive coordinator, Todd Monken, has moved on. He's no longer there. And Kirby Smart has hired one of his buddies, basically, from what I understand, to be the offensive coordinator. I'm exaggerating a little bit there to make a point. All I'm saying is there has been a lot of turnover there. And while Georgia's recruiting has been basically at another level now for the last 5-6 seasons or so, and I suspect they'll be fine and win the East once again, I think this Missouri team is good enough to at least give the Dogs some trouble in Athens once again, although, frankly, it's going to be hard to get past Georgia this year. We're certainly not going to sneak up on them after last year's game. No doubt about that. And, of course, what it's going to take for Missouri to have a truly special season in this final season in the SEC East, well, obviously the offense has got to get better. Simply put, the quarterback play's got to be better. The offensive line play's got to be better. The play calling has got to be better. The whole thing, quite honestly. And you know what? Again, with Dominic Levitt being gone, I think we need Luther Burden to step up into that slot position. And by the way, at the punt returner position a little bit too, we need him to become a true star this season if the true dream scenario is going to happen and another East crown actually happens before Missouri. And plus, obviously, the defensive ends at least need to be good, right? They don't need to be great considering the state of the Missouri defense, but they at least need to be passable at the very least. Also, we need Harrison Mevis to regain his form, by the way, his form from the previous 2 seasons, because, well, in 2022, let's be honest, Harrison Mevis cost Missouri a game down in Auburn, and he just wasn't quite the same guy as he had been the previous 2 seasons. And ultimately, I think Missouri's first string, especially defensively, is incredibly strong on paper. I also think the offense looks pretty good on paper at this moment, first string wise too. But unlike Georgia, unlike LSU, other Missouri opponents, but especially those 2, the second string has more questions than answers at this point. So injuries are going to be a major, major factor in this Missouri season. If they can remain healthy, if we can, I don't know, can we get Pat Ivy back somehow? That's a joke, but seriously though, can we get Pat Ivy back? But injuries are always a massive, massive factor. Maybe Georgia can get unlucky for once. All I'm saying is, hey, 1%, 1.3% chance to win the entire conference. Well, I'll give us, hey, maybe a 5% chance to win the East. How about that? Better than 1 in a million for Lloyd Christmas. And coming up, the last couple days in the national media, well, as some prominent NFL running backs like Dalvin Cook have struggled to find the payday they were looking for, there's been a lot of debate about the running back position in general in pro football. You may have noticed the last couple days. Well, I want to relate this to college football. Specifically, when was the last time you felt like a Missouri season was derailed by bad running back play? Well, I want to answer that question and also just weigh in on the great running back debate in general. But first, I want to tell you that these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates possible. Well, that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. And I can tell you this from experience as a small business owner. Over at CoMotion Dance, we found several great candidates really quickly. And again, for free, people are working with us to this day. So here's all you got to do. Add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your current LinkedIn profile to help spread the word that you're hiring. There's simple tools like screening questions that make it easy to focus on the candidates with the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and, of course, ultimately hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thanks for making Locked On Mizzou your first listen every day, and everydayers coming up soon on the show. I want to break down why I think Oklahoma State abandoning the Bedlam rivalry is actually a lot more defensible and different than Bill Self's move against the Missouri Tigers a decade or so ago. Yeah, I know. It seems like I'm talking my book here, and I am, but trust me, this is going to make a lot of sense when we get there. And before I weigh in on the great running back debate, by the way, here, I do feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up D'Moi Hodge and Kobe Brown and their summer league, which just wrapped up here, the NBA Summer League in Las Vegas. Generally speaking, that's for guys in the first, I believe, 3 years of their career. For those of you unfamiliar, a lot of rookies for the most part, but I believe I know Drew Smith played, and I believe Jonte Porter participated in summer league action as well. Drew Smith had some encouraging results too, but I think we're kind of expecting Drew is going to be hanging around in the NBA next year, and it sure seems like that Kobe Brown and D'Moi Hodge have a great chance too. Now, Kobe Brown being a first-round draft pick, almost certain he's going to make the Clippers in year one. But D'Moi Hodge being undrafted, well, you couldn't have really imagined a better summer league for him so far. Now, I do want to caution people that despite, especially Kobe Brown the other night had over 30 points, 35-something points, and 7 3-pointers. Well, D'Moi Hodge the other night, 7 3-pointers of his own against Kobe and the Clippers. Unfortunately, Kobe had to leave that game early with an ankle injury. Doesn't sound like that's going to be anything serious whatsoever. Obviously, an ankle turn in July, not exactly likely to linger into the NBA season, which begins in, I believe, early November. But again, I'm somebody who does follow pro basketball pretty closely, by the way. One of my favorite things in the world is just basketball in general. And one thing I know from following that sport forever is you got to take summer league with a real grain of salt. There have been guys who have looked like absolute superstars in summer league that were not even useful NBA players when the real lights actually came on. And by the other token, well, I remember Trae Young most recently looked like he couldn't even play basketball, period. He was like, I don't know, a 20% shooter, literally. Something crazy awful in summer league. And people were probably thinking, oh my God, what in the heck has just happened? But obviously Trae Young has ended up being a productive NBA player. Whether they should have traded him for Luka Doncic is a whole other discussion. But my point is, while we should caution ourselves into thinking that, well, Kobe's going to be an NBA superstar, going to score 30 points a night or something, I will say the fact that both guys are knocking down the NBA three in summer league, well, that's really encouraging. And Brown in particular showing that he can knock them down off the dribble and off of the catch. Man, his multi abilities there are really impressive. He's a versatile player. And by the way, he showed his ability to just bully guards off switches too, which is a very valuable skill in the modern NBA where a ton, and in college too, by the way, as we saw last year, where a ton of defenses now switch practically every single ball screen. D'Moi Hodge too, again, if he shows he can knock down the NBA three, which he's showing right now, he's got a path. He really does have a path, because especially playing for a team like the Lakers, a team that has a ton of its salary wrapped up into two players, LeBron James and Anthony Davis, two of the best, 10 or so players in the entire league, maybe even better than that. Well, you just need to find some unearthed gems, some hidden gems like D'Moi Hodge, a guy who can play some defense, give you some energy off the bench, knock down a three-pointer. And also, by the way, as we saw at Missouri, a guy who is really adept at cutting off of the ball too. So a guy that LeBron James will hopefully be able to find away from the ball. And, again, assuming he makes the team and all that stuff, that's still a long way to go for D'Moi. But so far, I don't think there could have been a more encouraging start for that young man. And transitioning back to football and the running back position, I have noticed some Missouri fans are a little bit concerned about that position. Obviously, Nathaniel Pete completely fell out of favor after some fumbling issues last year. I still think there's more juice in that orange. I think it's quite possible that Pete has a nice bounce back season this year. I also think Cody Schrader is a really solid player for sure. Tavoris Jones maybe has a chance to break out this year, and it sounds like true freshman Jamal Roberts, I believe his name. Off the top of my head, I believe that's correct. If I got that wrong, I apologize, but definitely a true freshman back that expects to play this year as well. And the point is, it just doesn't seem like running backs are all that hard to find. And I did go on a little bit of a rant yesterday on Twitter at Locked On Mizzou about, how salary restrictions, especially at the rookie level, have really hurt running backs, especially their ability to cash in early at a position where guys did cash in really early in the days before the rookie salary cap. Well, that just doesn't happen anymore. Teams have figured out that signing a 25, 26-year-old running back, that's just diminishing returns almost every single time. But from a Missouri perspective, we're in a land where there isn't any salary cap or anything really holding down running backs whatsoever in college football. It's a completely different scenario. Again, even in the college level, running backs just really aren't that hard to find. Even back to 2020, I think there were Missouri beat writers that said that Larry Roundtree was the most important guy or the MVP of the team that year. And I got to be honest, I raised my eyebrows at that at the time, not because I didn't think Larry Roundtree was a fine player and a great Tiger, but I just think running backs, again, if you can't find a productive running back, that's a real failing, especially in the Southeastern Conference. And guess what happened? Next season, I would argue in 2021, Tyler Beatty was even better. And despite the fact that, Missouri may have missed Tyler Beatty last year for certain, I still just think that isn't what held Missouri back last year. Despite that, yes, the Nathaniel Pete fumble against Auburn, we can point out some things. Maybe Beatty, would have scored against Georgia. Maybe Schrader doesn't get caught from behind at the 1 yard line. Quite possible. And yet, I still think Missouri should and maybe could have won both of those games. But really the point here is, without redoing the 2022 close games for the millionth time on this here podcast, the point is, when was the last time that the running back position truly held back the Missouri offense? Because I can't really think of one. I honestly can't. And I really have I know some people are going to say, Ish Witter wasn't all that great in 2014 or 2015. We can sit here and have a debate about how good of a player Ish Witter was, but I just have a hard time blaming 2015's offensive collapse on him, as if Henry Josie would have somehow made things significantly better when you've got a patchwork offensive line, basically no productive wide receivers other than Jamon Moore, who was banged up a ton that year. And then, a true freshman at quarterback in Drew Lock, a guy who was not ready to play yet, the plan all season was for Matty Mock to be the starter. Well, he gets kicked off the team. No need to rehash that whole situation. Again, I can think of a lot of times in recent Missouri history, really just the last 30 years or so, where quarterback play has held back the offense, where the offensive line has held back the offense, where a lack of receivers and tight ends has held back the offense. But in terms of the running back position, I got a lot tougher time coming up with examples of that. And coming up, the Faurot Field track. It's been finally covered at last. And I'm happy about it, but I've noticed some are mocking those who have been too obsessed with the track. Well, I don't know that I've been obsessed with the track, but anyway, I just think this whole debate shows that most people are really, really awful at cost-benefit analysis. And I want to explain that right after these quick messages. So many Missouri fans the past few seasons, including myself, couldn't help but notice that when football players, when their metal spikes run off the sidelines at Faurot Field and at a high speed, if they hit that track at the wrong time, well, suddenly it's basically like they're on ice skates. And yeah, these guys kind of hit the ground fairly hard, that type of deal. And fortunately, there's never been any serious injuries that I'm aware of, or maybe even any minor injuries as far as I'm aware of, with the slip and slide effect here that football cleats seem to have on Missouri's track around the football field. Well, a lot of people have mocked the people on, like, apparently a lot of people online have been talking about this a lot on message boards and what have you. I've definitely brought it up on this show. It's probably been a year or so since I've actually brought it up, but you know, the point of, okay, well, nobody's ever gotten hurt before. Why are you so worried about it? Well, I will tell you this. The first time I started really noticing it was the last season of the St. Louis Rams. They were hosting the San Francisco 49ers. Reggie Bush, the former great USC running back, runs out of bounds, slides on the track that was around the Trans World Dome. I assume it's probably still there. He slides on it, blows out his knee, and Reggie Bush is never seen again. That was the final play of his NFL career. I always felt awful for Reggie Bush that he hurt himself on a non-contact play that really was completely avoidable. And that's the thing. We don't have to wait for some Missouri Tiger or a Missouri opponent to unnecessarily hurt themselves on this track. And the thing is, the people who come back and say, well, it's never happened before, clearly it has happened in the NFL. I just gave you an example of it. And clearly we have seen guys slide on this thing before. My whole point is, okay, is this the biggest risk in college football? Yeah, no, it isn't. I'm with you there. There are other things. Just playing college football in general is a big risk. No question about that. Again, let's get back to cost-benefit analysis here. It would be one thing if you had to tear down all of Faurot Field to fix the track. It would be even another thing if you had to unearth the track, get into big dig movers, bulldozers, backhoes, and what have you to destroy the thing and put in a new turf. But no, all Missouri did was simply cover the track with some type of carpet or rug or more artificial turf, whatever it might be. I mean, my God, in the grand scheme of things, considering the millions and millions and millions of dollars that go through the coffers of the football program every year, what kind of cost could that have possibly been? What did that cost? 10 grand, maybe at most? What are we talking about here? I think my annual TSF donation is probably about in that ballpark. So again, folks, I get it. The track, not the biggest deal in the entire world. If that's your point, great. But if your point is that means we shouldn't do anything about it, I think that's absurd. The cost of fixing the track problem, the slip and slide effect on the track at Faurot Field, well, guess what? It's done now, and it really didn't cost anything. So guess what? All of you are annoyed by this topic. You guess what? You got what you want too. Now we can shut up about it. Congratulations. So, thanks again for listening to Locked On Mizzou. Again, for you everydayers, we'll have all the Missouri football and basketball news you can possibly get, and why I think Yes, Oklahoma State has a point by telling Oklahoma to shove it on the Bedlam rivalry. I think it's a lot different than the Bill Self situation a decade ago. But hey, that's just me. I'm a Mizzou fan. I'll explain it to you coming up next time on Locked On Mizzou.